That was amazing. I just, Chip Wilson, everybody. I, I normally say I wish my mom heard that speech, Chip, but she's actually watching, so she did. Hi, Mom, wherever you are back in Boca. I know it's late. Thank you for staying up. I love you. Um, so let me say thank you, Jay Lapierre. I look forward to meeting you in person. Jennifer, you're amazing. Thank you. Thank you for all the work that you do. You know, Jennifer sent me some beautiful notes and letters and emails, and then sent me some beautiful framed pages from Atlas Shrugged. And I'm like, how does she know who I am? And how does she know I'm like this like huge Ayn Rand fan? And it's like, oh my God. And then it's like, Peter, would you be our recipient? I was like, oh, man, I'm I'm involved in running 5 companies, and I've got 2 9-year-old kids, and it's like, and then Chip Wilson calls. And to know Chip is to know he is a force to be reckoned with and a man you don't say no to lightly. So, Chip, thank you. I am honored to be here today because of your work and Jennifer's work, and to be honored by something that goes so deep into my heart, so deep into my heart. Let me also say thank you to my friend Garrett, who's hosting us at this amazing location at Calamigos and gave us these awesome variant masks. I mean, this is like, for me, the variant mask is the most comfortable mask out there. And I love it. I love it. I love it. So it's like when Jennifer said, well, we'll do it at Calamigos and we'll have variant masks. I'm like, how do you know me so well? You're stacking everything. It's like, the answer is yes, of course. You had me at Chip Wilson. So each of us here today who know Atlas Shrugged has a story. Has a story of how Ayn Rand's work touched our heart, and how, for some of us, maybe all of us here, it lit it on fire. My story goes back to college. I grew up in New York, passionate about space. You know, Apollo, there were 2 things that got me going, Apollo and Star Trek, right? Apollo showed us what the world could do. Extraordinary. A page out of history, impossible. It was the sort of the exaltation of the human mind. And then that scientific documentary called Star Trek showed us where the world was going. And I was convinced, I was sure, this is my life, this is what we're going to do. And there was no question about it. And, you know, my parents wanted me to become a doctor, and I went to medical school and make them happy, and I sent them a copy of my diploma, and then I went and started my launch company, as all good sons should do. Just ribbing you, Mom. But I became so angry. Angry is the right word, at how the government had just given up on the future we had in space, had mortgaged our future. And there's a point in every entrepreneur's life where you say, I refuse to let it be this way. Where you say, this is not the way I envisioned the future. Where you say, I'm going to do something about it. Where you take a step. And that first step was the organization I started in college called SEDS, Students for Exploration Development in Space. And it was something which I was so nervous to do. And it was the first time that I took a step out as an entrepreneur. And it turned out now, God knows, can't even add up the decades, 40 years later, it's a dominant college space organization around the world. And I met 2 amazing men there. One was a gentleman by the name of Morris Hornick, who I'll never forget, and Todd Hawley, my closest, dearest friend at the time, who unfortunately passed away from complications from AIDS. And I'm so happy that that we have sponsors supporting the work that's done in that area. I remember it was a summer, I was down in Washington, D.C., and Morris and Todd approached me and they said, we have something for you, something very important. And I said, what is it? And they said, there's a book you have to read, but you can't read it yet. I was like, what do you mean? He said, you have to read Fountainhead first. And then once you read Fountainhead, you'll be ready to read the next book. What's the name of the next book? I'm not going to tell you. You have to read this book first. And so I literally diligently went and like page after page after page and read the book and loved the book and went back and had to speak to them about what the book was about and what I got out of the book. And then they said, okay, here's the next book. And Atlas Shrugged became my Bible. It became my Bible from a spiritual awakening standpoint, from a point of just igniting on fire the ability of the human mind to conquer anything. And that's truly where we are day after day, but we forget that. We forget that. We forget that. And so I would literally read Atlas Shrugged every year. I would have notes and my favorite quotes, and it became so critically important to me. So that passion of space didn't go away. And it became a realization that something had to happen. And for me, the first step I took in that place, and Chip discussed it beautifully, was a concept called the X Prize. There are heroes in many people out there, and it's yet to be ignited. And it was in 1996 on the steps of St. Louis under the arch where I threw a gauntlet down. I had read Charles Lindbergh's book, The Spirit of St. Louis, and knew that in 1927 he had flown from New York to Paris, an unsung hero, someone who had not even been flying airplanes a couple of years earlier. And he makes that trip in 33 and a half hours to win a $25,000 prize. And when I read Lindbergh's biography, The Spirit of St. Louis, I said, that's it. I'm going to create a prize to open up spaceflight. And so under the arch in 1996, I challenged the world that we're going to give a $10 million prize for the first team to build a private spaceship and carry 3 adults up into space and down safely again. And the challenge was, when I stood on that stage, I didn't have $10 million. And I didn't have any teams. But all the media and the cameras were there. No one asked. And I didn't kind of offer the details. It took me 5 years to fund that prize. And after having 150 amazing, brilliant, wealthy, but spineless CEOs say no, because what if someone dies was the consistent answer, fear, consistent drive. I met this woman over here, Anusha Ansari. Anusha, born in Tehran, looked at the same stars I did, loved Star Trek as well, understood the scientific documentary nature of that show, had just sold her company for $1.3 billion in telecom technologies, and I tracked her down vacationing in Hawaii after they had done an asset sale. I was her first meeting when she got back, and probably on my 151st ask for a sponsor, she and her family stepped up to fund it. We named it the Ansari X Prize. Since then, she's traveled privately into space. If you're looking for an honoree next year, I'm putting my chips on Anusha right now. And since then, she has become the CEO of the X Prize Foundation, which I'm very proud of. So the question is, what is impossible? Within the laws of physics, and even then we don't fully understand them, I find very little to be impossible. We're living in a world today that is a fundamental miracle. And we forget consistently the extraordinary world we live in, where you can pick up a device, ask any question and get the answer in microseconds. You can have free video calls on the other side of the planet. You can talk about, we're gonna have flying cars, not, in 20 years, like in the next year, they're working now, where cars can drive autonomously, where you can think about, if you have a genetic ailment, you can talk about correcting it in yourself. Where we can think about not only extending the human lifespan a little bit, and 30 years is just the starting point, dude. I'm shooting for hundreds. The technologies we have in computation and sensors and networks and AI and robotics and 3D printing and synthetic biology and AR and VR and blockchain are unleashing the human mind. The only limitation is truly imagination. And even then we'll augment that. So there is nothing that is truly impossible. Now the question is, what do we want? What do we want to create? What is the future we desire? Not the future we're getting, but the future we want to actively, fundamentally create. That's the important question to be asking. And Chip, you're right, it is all about mindset, right? So when you think about the greatest players on the planet, whoever you might think they are, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, if you ask yourself, what made them great? Was it the money they started with, the technology they had, or was it their mindset? Fundamentally, it is their mindset. You can take away everything else, and the mindset prevails. It selects what decisions you make, where you go, what you do with your life. And yet, few of us ever take the time to shape the mindset we desire. Right? If it's that important. So the work that I do is the mindset of yes, I can. Right? That's what we do when we launch an X Prize. We're launching X Prizes across the board to extract carbon from the atmosphere, to take stem cells and grow stem cell-based chicken or beef or meat of any type to feed the world, or extract water from the atmosphere, or 3D print homes, or whatever it is, right? Because our job is to create heroes. You spoke about heroes, and I think that is, we're living into a world where heroes can come into existence in almost any area we desire. So, by the way, Jennifer wrote this beautiful speech I want to acknowledge you for, which I would love to spend the next 20 minutes reading it, but I'm not. But there was a great comment she made, and I can't help because it was so beautifully penned. In 2004, on October 2004, on September the 29th, Spaceship One, Burt Rutan's ship, had made the first flight into space. It had gone to 100 kilometers. And to win the prize, he had to do another flight within 2 weeks. And he set October 4th as the date of the second flight. In the Mojave Desert, we had tens of thousands of cars there. It was amazing, pre-dawn, beautiful, the sun coming up, and this spaceship coming down the Mojave runway. And the night before, the prize required that you fly the weight equivalent of 3 people. But we didn't want to risk 3 lives, so we said, okay, you can fly with a person, and you can fly with the weight equivalent of 2 other people. So the night before, we got to go and stuff the ballast boxes, not the ballot boxes, as Jennifer told me, the ballast boxes. And each of us got a certain amount of weight we could stick to make up for the 2 missing humans. And I flew 3 books. I flew The Spirit of St. Louis by Charles Lindbergh that inspired the whole X Prize, and a beautiful story. I flew The Man Who Sold the Moon by Robert Heinlein. I'm very proud to be a Heinlein laureate, and it's a book that lit my entrepreneurial mind on fire, that the greatest wealth the human race will ever create is in the stars. Everything we hold of value on Earth, metals, minerals, energy, real estate, is in infinite quantities in space. And we are on the verge, as the human race, to moving off the planet to the stars. Whatever we evolve into 1,000 years from now, 1,000,000 years from now, it'll be these next couple of decades that jump, that step occurs. And the only time that's happened before is when the lungfish moved out of the oceans onto land. Right? This is a magical time, not a matter of if, just when. Elon's building Starship right now, extraordinary, putting to shame all the aerospace industries of what he's been able to take the risk to fund to do. So that book was the second. The third, of course, was Atlas Shrugged, because that book was the beginning of this life that I'm living. So, there are 2 quotes from Atlas Shrugged I want to just read because they're important to me. And it's the first quote reminds me of the power we have to create the world we desire. Quote, "I started my life with a single absolute, that the world was mine to shape in the image of my highest values, and never to be given up to a lesser standard, no matter how long or hard the struggle." I think that's true for all of us, right? I jokingly say X Prize was an overnight success after 11 years of hard work. And so I'm blessed by the fact that I've had a chance to do what I love and to live a life that I'm proud of. And there's nothing more than I could ever want for anybody. And so as we are amongst this COVID pandemic, and I think I'll close on just 2 words about that, and a quote. First of all, thank you for taking it seriously with the masks and the PCR testing. I do appreciate it. And please know, we'll see what the numbers are for the pandemic, what the mortality rates truly are. And I call COVID-19 a practice pandemic. My heart goes out to those who have been taken ill, or those who have gotten sick and died, or those who have lost their jobs. But please know, it could have been far, far worse. And what this has done is uncovered sort of the failings, but hopefully put things on fire for the next one. What I take joy from is that if you think about what happened in March when we had nothing, to the fuse being lit, to where we are 6 months later, where ventilators and PPE and vaccines and reactions, these are the products of the human mind. There's never been a greater collaboration among scientists on the planet than now. And so it's these sort of positive rays of light out of the negativity that give me hope. And as I say every time I get a chance on the pulpit to say, stop watching the news. It will kill you. Mom, I'm talking to you. I know you've stopped a lot more. I call it the crisis news network, or the constantly negative news network. I don't have a good acronym for Fox yet. But our brains are wired for negative news, right? On the savannas of Africa a million years ago, if you missed a piece of negative news, you were dinner. Today, it abuses us. 10 minutes, that's all you need. 10 minutes, you know if you're in problem or not. So, last quote, one of my favorites and one of Todd's favorites. All this lunacy is temporary. It can't last. It's demented, so it has to defeat itself. You and I just have to work a little harder for a while, that's all. An honor and a pleasure. Thank you all. I'm so proud and so thankful. You have ignited my 21-year-old heart back on fire again. Thank you all so much.